Margaret had worked as a cleaner at Sterling Holdings for nearly 15 years. Every weekday, she arrived before sunrise, quietly mopping the marble floors, dusting the reception desks, and making sure the office looked perfect before the employees arrived. Most people barely noticed her. To them, she was just another cleaner wearing old clothes and carrying a worn-out mop. At 68 years old, Margaret lived a simple life. Her uniform was faded, her shoes were old, and she never complained, even when her back ached after hours of work. She greeted everyone with a warm smile every morning, but very few smiled back. Among the employees was Richard, the branch manager. Richard believed appearances were everything. He hated seeing Margaret around important clients and often spoke to her with little respect. "You're too slow," he would say. "Try not to embarrass this company." Margaret would simply nod and continue working. One Monday morning, the office was busier than usual. Important visitors were expected, and everyone rushed around preparing for their arrival. As Margaret carefully pushed her cleaning cart across the lobby, someone hurried past her without looking. The cart struck a decorative stand, sending it crashing onto the polished floor. Her bucket tipped over, and water spread across the entrance. The loud noise made everyone turn around. For a moment, the lobby was completely silent. Then the laughter began. Several employees laughed openly. One young man even pulled out his phone and started recording. "Look at her," someone whispered. "She can't even clean properly." Margaret quickly bent down, trying to gather the broken decorations with trembling hands. Just then, a young receptionist named Emma rushed over. Without saying a word, Emma knelt beside Margaret, helping her pick up the broken pieces. "It's okay," Emma said gently. "Accidents happen." Margaret looked at her with grateful eyes. But before either of them could finish cleaning the mess, a loud, angry voice echoed across the lobby. "Emma." Richard was walking toward them with a furious expression. Richard stopped in front of Emma and Margaret, his face burning with anger. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. Emma stood up calmly. "I'm helping her clean the spill." Richard shook his head. "Your job is to attend to customers, not waste time with a cleaner." "The customers can wait a minute," Emma replied. "She needs help." The entire lobby fell silent. No one had ever spoken back to Richard before. Richard stepped closer. "You have two choices. Apologize right now, or go home without pay." Emma looked at Margaret, who quietly shook her head as if begging her not to get into trouble. But Emma stood her ground. "I won't apologize for helping someone." Richard pointed toward the exit. "Fine. Leave. Don't come back until tomorrow." Emma picked up her handbag without another word. Before leaving, she turned to Margaret. "I hope you're okay." Margaret smiled softly. "Thank you, my dear. Never stop being kind." Emma nodded and walked out of the building. The employees watched from a distance. Some laughed quietly while others whispered that Emma had just ruined her career over an old cleaner. Margaret finished cleaning the floor alone. She picked up her mop and slowly returned to work as though nothing had happened. Later that afternoon, an email was sent to every employee. Subject: Important announcement. The company's founder had officially retired. A new chief executive officer would be arriving the following morning to take over the entire company. Excitement spread through every department. Richard immediately gathered all the staff. "I want this office spotless," he said. "Everything must be perfect before the new CEO arrives." Then his eyes landed on Margaret. He frowned. "You?" He slowly looked at her faded uniform. "I don't want the new CEO seeing you around the lobby." Margaret lowered her head. Richard continued coldly. "Tomorrow morning, stay inside the cleaning storage room until I tell you to come out." Margaret quietly whispered, "Yes, sir." She turned and slowly walked away, completely unaware that tomorrow would change everyone's life forever. The next morning, Sterling Holdings looked more like a five-star hotel than an office. Fresh flowers decorated the reception area, the marble floor sparkled, and every employee wore their best clothes. Richard walked around inspecting every corner. No mistakes today, he warned. The new CEO could arrive at any moment. Margaret arrived quietly, just as she always did. She smiled politely and picked up her mop. Before she could begin cleaning, Richard stopped her. I told you yesterday. Stay out of sight. He pointed toward the small cleaning storage room at the end of the hallway. I don't want the new CEO thinking we hire beggars. Margaret lowered her eyes. I'm sorry. She quietly carried her bucket into the storage room and gently closed the door behind her. A few minutes later, the sound of expensive cars pulling into the company entrance echoed through the building. Employees rushed to the glass windows. It's him. The new CEO is here. 3 luxury black SUVs stopped outside. The rear door of the middle vehicle slowly opened. A tall, well-dressed young man stepped out wearing a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. His confident walk immediately commanded everyone's attention. His name was Michael Carter. The board members welcomed him with warm smiles and firm handshakes. Richard quickly stepped forward. Welcome to Sterling Holdings, sir. It's an honor to finally meet you. Michael smiled politely as they walked into the lobby. Everyone began applauding. Richard proudly introduced department heads one after another. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. Then, Michael suddenly stopped walking. His smile disappeared. His eyes fixed on something down the hallway. Without saying a single word, he turned away from the executives. Ignoring every greeting, he began walking toward the cleaning storage room. The applause slowly faded. Confused whispers filled the lobby. Richard frowned. Sir, your office is this way. But Michael didn't answer. He kept walking until he reached the old wooden door. Then, he slowly reached for the handle. The entire office watched in complete silence. Michael slowly opened the storage room door. Inside, Margaret was quietly organizing her cleaning supplies, unaware that everyone was staring at her. She looked up in surprise. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael's eyes filled with tears. A warm smile spread across his face. Mom, he whispered. Margaret froze. She dropped the cleaning cloth she was holding. Michael, she said softly, hardly believing her eyes. Without hesitation, Michael walked toward her. He knelt on one knee and wrapped his arms tightly around his mother. I've missed you so much. Margaret hugged him back as tears rolled down her cheeks. So have I, my son. The office lobby was completely silent. No one could believe what they were seeing. Richard's face turned pale. The employees who had laughed at Margaret stared in shock. One woman slowly covered her mouth. Another employee dropped the file he was holding. Emma, who had just returned to work, stood frozen near the reception desk. She couldn't believe the elderly cleaner everyone had looked down on was actually the mother of the company's new CEO. Michael slowly stood up, still holding Margaret's hand. He turned to face the staff. This woman, he paused, is the strongest person I have ever known. When my father died, she worked day and night to make sure I stayed in school. She sacrificed everything so I could build the life I have today. Michael looked directly at Richard. I heard everything. Richard swallowed nervously. Yes, sir. Michael raised his hand. I'm not finished. Then he looked around at every employee. And I want everyone to gather in the conference room. There are some decisions that need to be made. For the first time, Richard realized his job was hanging by a thread. The conference room was silent. Every employee sat nervously as Michael stood at the front beside his mother. Richard could barely lift his head. Michael looked around the room before speaking. I didn't come here today just to become your new CEO. I came to learn something. Everyone exchanged confused looks. He continued. For the past 3 months, my mother insisted on keeping her job as a cleaner. I begged her to stop. But she told me she wanted to see how people treat those they believe are unimportant. The room became even quieter. Michael pressed a button on the remote in his hand. The large screen behind him came to life. Security camera footage began to play. There was Richard shouting at Margaret. Another clip showed employees laughing as she struggled to clean the spilled water. Then another. Emma kneeling beside Margaret, helping her without hesitation. When the videos ended, no one could look Margaret in the eyes. Michael turned toward Richard. You humiliated my mother. You judged her because of her uniform. You forgot that every person deserves respect. Richard stood up, his voice shaking. Sir. I'm deeply sorry. Please give me another chance. Michael calmly replied. A good leader never humiliates people to feel important. As of today, you're relieved of your duties. Richard slowly removed his company ID card and placed it on the table before security escorted him out. Michael then looked at the other employees who had mocked Margaret. I hope today changes how you see people. Finally, he smiled at Emma. You helped my mother when you believed she had nothing to offer you. Kindness like that cannot be taught. I'm promoting you to executive assistant to the CEO. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sir. I won't let you down. Margaret proudly hugged Emma. As everyone stood to applaud, Michael looked around the room one last time. Always remember this. A person's true character is revealed by how they treat someone who can do nothing for them. From that day forward, Sterling Holdings became known not only for its success, but for treating every employee with dignity and respect.